how to make a career in public policy. So I have divided this video into 3 parts. First and foremost, the motivation. I think that if you have clicked on this video, then you must be motivated about public policy. But assuming that your motivation may come from different arenas, I would definitely like to actually share my motivation, what were my motivation. And then slowly and steadily we will start building the stepwise process. What's step number 1, what's step number 2 for you to actually build a career in public policy. So let's definitely start with the motivation around it, right? The why do people actually build a career in public policy? So first and foremost, I think at a subject level, at a content level, there is this thing about public policy consulting, which is very different than management consulting or private sector work, which is that public policy work is actually very macro. Of course, it is related to macroeconomics as well at times, but the topic or the impact or the kind of numbers that you look at are really huge, right? So for example, when I was working with Government of India, I was directly working with the center, and within the center, I was not actually working with the line ministry. I was working with this Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances. That's where 1.5 out of my 2 years of career in Government of India was spent. So that really brought out the macro, right? We were looking at the national level and then the state level and then at the district level. So if you realize that macro doesn't excite you at times or big picture doesn't excite you at times, it's the on ground implementation work, then public policy is still for you. But in this specific video, I wanted to actually touch upon more about policy consulting, what is really policy advisory, right? And how to build a career in that. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is, truth be told, when I pivoted from private sector to then public sector, I got this really humbling feeling that the entire work that I was doing was way more meaningful, way more impactful than the work that I was doing before. Ideally, I shouldn't be comparing, but I kind of felt more peaceful when I was sleeping at the end of the day. I kind of felt more motivated when I was waking up next day to go to office and do my work. I felt that my hours, my work was actually impacting someone's life, right? It may not directly, but indirectly, there will be people out there whose lives will be impacted through my work. So that was another motivation for me to actually work in policy consulting. At the same time, you should definitely know the downsides of working in policy consulting. Let's talk about the pay, right? What is the pay parity between private sector consulting and policy consulting? I have actually done policy consulting both at a national level, at an international level. And both the times what I've found is that the starting salaries are actually pretty much at par if you join a good organization. However, what typically happens in a private sector role is that your journey, especially in firms such as management consulting like BCG, McKinsey, even if you're doing public sector work, your salary actually increases like a hockey stick, right? It's an exponential curve. However, in policy consulting, your starting salary may be at par, but your salary will eventually not increase like a hockey stick, right? Because the variable component starts getting missed out on. So for example, when I was in Dubai, I was working as an international foreign policy advisor. My salary as a consultant or as an advisor was actually matching my peers at BCG who were working in Dubai. But had I stayed for a longer period of time, then my peers' salary would have taken that hockey stick curve. However, in my case, I would have probably taken a simple linear curve, etc. Just saying that was not my focus of motivation, but just helping you guys know the starting salaries in these days for policy consulting are actually frankly not bad. However, if you really just want to become rich, it may not be necessarily the best career fit for you. That's point number 1. Point number 2, once again, before we even jump into how to build a career in public policy, you should know the speed and the agility. At times, policy consulting can be slow. At times, it can be frankly frustrating as well. I recall of my 2 instances where, for example, in Government of India, we were picking up this really major overhaul of digitizing the paperwork with Government of India. And that meant right from the secretaries to the clerks, we were working with all of them, and there were just too much pushback. at times I would just be this young 25-year-old and just think, hey, why am I actually wasting my time with all of these people who are probably not motivated to bring a transformative change. But at the end of the journey, it was really motivating because we were able to move the needle very dramatically. Similarly, during my time as an international policy advisor, I felt that things were taking way more time than in private sector or in a startup ecosystem, and as a young professional it can be frustrating. So I do not intend to demotivate you because you have clicked on this video to learn how to make a career in public policy, but at the same time I do believe that's my moral right to also actually inform you about the financial implications. At the same time, the agility at times take a toll, but truth be told, those were the two factors that didn't impact my career decisions a lot, but still putting it out there. For me, I think what really mattered was working on macro issues, and at the same time getting to impact someone's life and not just make myself rich, right? I do not want to make this world where rich people are just making other people rich. I wanted to bridge the income inequality. That's in fact one of my life mottos that I intend to serve through Global Governance Initiative. So, all right, with that, we're actually done with the motivation section. Why policy consulting? So watch till the end because I am going to be sharing a step-by-step process, and the last one is actually frankly the most important one because people reach till that stage somehow or the other, but they fail at that stage. So it's really important for you to be prepared to the best of your abilities as and when you reach that stage. So step number one is identifying the right organizations, right? As and when we try to build a career in public policy. What do I mean by the right organization? I would actually divide the entire universe of policy consulting and public policy work into two parts: implementation and strategical work, right? Now, implementation, what is implementation? Implementation could be that I have a scheme, I have a policy, but now I want to implement it. You are not going to be the one as a policy advisor or as a policy consultant to be implementing it, but you are going to be the one who can expedite the process, who can figure out the bottlenecks, who can actually be monitoring it. It may not sound frankly as cool and as sexy as the advisory role, but truth be told, I actually did this project, like I said, of digitizing paperwork. It just may sound very mundane, but it's actually the project that was really transformative for me because I saw change really happening in front of my eyes. So those are the implementation projects. Now, what are really strategical projects? Strategical projects is government entity will actually hire you to set up a public policy unit from scratch, or they would tell you the policy and they will say that the time to deliver this policy is actually more than what we anticipated. Can you figure out the procedural or operational challenges, so on and so forth. Now, there are organizations that actually play at the intersection of both. They will do implementation, strategy, policy work, and there will be organizations who would just do a lot of implementation work, and there will be organizations who would just do a lot of, I would say, strategy work. So let me actually, I always take notes for you guys so that I'm not missing out on content to provide you the truest value. Let's start with implementation. So definitely big four in India, KPMG, EY, etc. They do a lot of good quality implementation work, and once again, they do not implement the policies on ground themselves, but they are heavily invested in making sure that the schemes are monitored, what gets monitored gets done. So eventually, because they are monitoring the KPIs, KPIs, key performance indicators, they end up catching up any red alert, any red flags. Similarly, there are state governments actually who hire young professionals. So for example, Chhattisgarh government hires young professionals. There is Haryana Young Professional Program. There is Rajasthan Young Professional Program. Delhi has also come up with this similar program. These young professionals in their 20s or early 30s would actually join a department at a district level or at a chief minister's office level, and they would be heavily involved in expediting things at a day-to-day basis, or probably create a war room, right? For example, Maharashtra also has a really good quality chief minister's fellowship program. What do I mean by war room? War room is basically a management consulting jargon. War room is basically there would be a dashboard and the chief minister would come and monitor the status of all of these schemes and programs, and then realize which scheme is actually running on time, which is behind the time, so on and so forth. So that is basically the kind of landscape in terms of the job opportunities that are out there. So that's on implementation. The landscape looks more richer for the advisory part, right? And I'm going to be covering national and international opportunities both. So on national, of course, I will start with the Ministry of Commerce, Quality Council of India. That is where I was employed. That's where I started my journey. But of course, I was the 15th member to join the team back in 2016. In 2021, when I'm shooting this video, that team is 500 member plus. So I'm sharing this, sharing all the experiences in the hindsight. Things could have changed at Quality Council of India, but they were actually doing both strategical work and implementation work, and I got a chance to actually do 1.5 years of strategical work and 6 months of implementation work as well. So pretty kick-ass. So that's one opportunity for you. There is Samagra Consulting. Samagra Consulting is also doing some really good work. Oh, this is really cool actually. So at Global Governance Initiative, we have GGI Fellows. GGI Fellowship is actually the most covetous program that we have. We hand-pick people who are mentored by McKinsey, BCG, Dalberg, Carney mentors, and we actually build a thought leadership on a public policy topic. And at the end of the day, we actually submit those thinkings and those papers to the respective ministries based on the relationships that Naman is the co-founder of Global Governance Initiative. Naman and I actually have formed during our time at Government of India. So fellows actually learn in that process, so learning by doing, and at the same time they also get to create an intended impact in public policy. So if you would be interested, feel free to apply for GGI Fellowship as well. That's on GGI. There are of course other management consulting firms as well who are deeply involved in policy consulting work. I would say FSG is one, Britspan is another, Dalberg is another. These three firms, FSG, Britspan and Dalberg, they are more tilted towards social impact consulting than necessarily policy consulting. There's a difference. Social impact consulting can be more tilted towards non-profits, and policy consulting, the client happens to be Government of India. My understanding is that 20-25% of their ballpark, it's a ballpark number, of their clients could be governments, but largely they focus on social impact consulting because they look at 20-25% of government. Hence, I actually wanted to share their name in the list as well. And then, of course, internationally, right? I was working at Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. I'm just sharing this, but please do know when you're applying internationally, they do look for a lot of things. For example, do you have any, so for example, when I got into Tony Blair to work as an advisor to Tony Blair, I already had public policy work at a national level. I had international exposure during my master's or an MBA, and lastly, I already had management consulting experience. All these three things combined together for me to land that public policy advisory role at an international level. And international firms typically they look for proof of concept. Do you have management consulting and especially international experience before? Because they want to know that you are internationally motivated to make a change as well. And then of course there are big the MBBs, right? McKinsey Public Sector is really good practice in Northern America, and similarly we have BCG Public Sector practice, very powerful both in India, in Middle East, and of course in other regions as well. And then of course you have other management consulting firms. So that's step number one. Why am I sharing this list? This is an exemplary list, right? It's not exhaustive, it's just very illustrative of implementation and strategy firms, so that you even know what kind of firms are actually doing policy consulting work. If you do not even know what kind of firms are out there, how would you even go about and apply? So that's step number one for all of you. Before we move to step number two, be sure to subscribe to this channel because I intend to put out daily videos on career advancement, personal finance, and productivity hacks. Moving on, the next step is definitely about designing your CVs. Oh my, how important is that? People typically do really shitty job at this. Please do yourself a favor, do not submit a shitty quality CV. Consulting CVs and policy consulting CVs look very similar. For example, you need to make sure you quantify each and every aspect of your work. People typically struggle with that. If you realize that you are not good at quantifying your existing work, it may be a little hint towards the fact that you might not make a good management consultant or a policy consultant. I'm sorry about this, but management consultants and policy consultants are actually obsessed with numbers. Even at when I was in Groupon India, even when I was not actually a management consultant, I would always end up doing a quantification of my work. It was very innate in me, and that's what my observation has been for most of my friends when I was working in BCG. It's a skill that can be nurtured as well, but if you realize that you do not enjoy it at all, then it could be a red signal. And then of course they look for spike. You need to have one extraordinary element amongst your education, experience, or extracurricular. I'll be happy to share across the link of Victor Cheng's resume advisory blog. It really helped me during my journey, but at the same time, it will take hard work. I've shared this link with a couple of people, and I've been surprised they still did shoddy job at building their resume. If you're lazy about building your resume, if you're lazy about your own career, I'm sorry. Nobody, frankly, on this planet can help you. So there is no shortcut about it. You have to make your good CV. So that's step number 2 for you in order to build a career. Step number 3 is, of course, apply on the website and get a referral if you can. Reach out to the managers of the firms where you have seen that opening. So you need to know that policy consulting largely is a very small niche circle. There are few people who have worked in policy consulting. It's kind of like impact investing in India. There are few people know people. There are few firms, right? It's an upward journey. Almost 10 years ago, there was no concept of policy consulting by lateral entrants, right? In India and of course in Middle East or in European region. But now this trend is rising. But still, I would say it's this covetous niche circle. So you need to make sure that you can reach out to a few people. Please do not write paragraphs. I get almost 300 in-mail messages on a daily basis on LinkedIn with these long paragraphs with their CV attached. Hey, can you refer me? It doesn't work like that. You need to just write 2 or 3 lines. Build credibility in those 2-3 lines. Why should they help you and not someone else? If you're from good institute, if you have worked with good leaders, if you have actually worked at really good organization, please throw that in. It is okay to name names at times, especially for when you're trying to cold email people. Cold emails can be tricky, but they have worked fantastically well for me as well. So write to them and see if they would like to advise you or guide you for you to be able to get that job, and then on that call see if they can end up referring you. Most of the referrals do not actually end up by asking for a referral until or unless the organizations have a referral ecosystem. Many organizations, especially mid-size, do not have a referral system. If you find that the referral system does not exist, then the only hope and the only advice that I would give to you would be to actually reach out to a mid-manager or a senior manager, especially a senior manager, and get on a short call with them, write to them on LinkedIn, send them actually a cold in-mail message, and see if they would be willing to actually advise you how to go about that process. People are typically really nice in terms of helping people, provided you write them a credible, short, relevant message. If you would be interested about how to write cold emails, or if you like my content, feel free to comment. It definitely motivates me to actually bring out best value for all of you. That brings me to my last point and the most important point. So step number 1, just to synthesize, we looked at the firms, right? These are illustrative, like I said. Step number 2 is you actually build a kick-ass CV. Step number 3 is you go on the job opening, you apply. And step number 4 is the last bonus point, which is that you prepare for policy cases. A lot of GGI fellows in their interviews actually tell us that they've reached the the first stage of FSG interviews, or for example, Government of India advisory interviews, but they failed. They were rejected. Why? Because just to be impulsive, they ended up going through step 1 to step 3, but they were not prepared for step 4. For example, at Global Governance Initiative, we have a mentor from Bain who prepares people for policy consulting interviews. In fact, we have an in-house Schrodinger, which is AI-based consulting, policy consulting, case interview prep, and of course for management consulting as well. So you can prepare at any time you want without being dependent on a mentor. But of course, we have a hybrid ecosystem as well. Policy consulting cases especially are more, I would say, trickier than management consulting private sector cases. Why? Because they're abstract in nature. At least in management consulting, you would know that I'm solving a profitability problem, which is revenue minus cost. Revenue is price into volume, cost is fixed cost plus variable cost, right? You can start, you have something to talk for initial 2 minutes. But in policy consulting cases, these are really abstract cases, right? For example, how do you increase the tax to GDP ratio of a country? It's an abstract case. How would you go about actually solving that case? Or how do you actually double farmers' income in agricultural domain? These cases take way more structure, way more practice, way more experience, especially from experienced professional. So just saying, at Global Governance Initiative, we provide those help. Shall you be interested? But at least from awareness point of view, please do yourself a favor. Do not be in that rejected pool just because you were not prepared for policy consulting cases. That's all I had to share in this video of how to make a career in public policy. I hope you're liking my content. Please give it a thumbs up. Please click on the bell icon so that you're notified every day as I am planning to put out content. Please take care, stay safe, bye. Subscribe right now so that you get notified every time, every day, whenever I'm putting up my videos on career advancement, personal finance, and lots of productivity hacks.